All right, hey everyone, this is Rudy, and I wanted to read this into YouTube to show the state of mind of Eric Holder's Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, the entire Obama administration, and how they tried to bias law enforcement officials all over this country with this MIAC report. I think it stands for Missouri Information Analysis Center. So I want to read this into YouTube, and at some point later, keep in mind this MIAC report came out in February 20th of 2009, and this particular report, which is a lexicon, domestic extremism lexicon, came out on March the 26th of 2009. This is the same time that the government is targeting Schaeffer Cox. Okay, it's the same time they were sending government informants to set him up, record him, and things like that. So again, I want to read the MIAC report first. At some point later, I'll read the domestic extremism lexicon. They're both about the same time frame, just a month apart. But let's get started. At the top of the page is Jeremiah W.J. Nixon, Governor, John M. Britt, Director, DPS, James F. Kethley, Colonel, MSHP, Van Godsey, Director, MIAC. MIAC Strategic Report, February 20th, 2009, Modern Militia Movement. They're constantly trying to demonize or devilize the modern militia movement. Modern militia movement. The militia movement began in the 1980s and reached its peak in 1996. Several social, economic, and political factors contributed to the surge in militia participation in the 1990s. The primary motivator for the movement was the farm crisis of the 1980s, which caused the destruction of three-quarters of a million small to medium-sized family farms. Overall, 11 million Americans lost their jobs during this time period. Academics contend that female and minority empowerment in the 1970s and 1960s caused a blow to white male sense of empowerment. This, combined with a sense of defeat from the Vietnam War, increased levels of immigration and unemployment spawned a paramilitary culture. This caught on in the 1980s with injects such as Tom Clancy novels, Soldier of Fortune magazine, and movies such as Rambo that glorified combat. This culture glorified white males and portrayed them as morally upright heroes who are mentally and physically tough. It was during this time frame that many individuals and organizations began to concoct conspiracy theories to explain their misfortunes. These theories varied, but almost always involved a globalist dictatorship, the New World Order, which conspired to exploit the working class citizens. United Nations troops were thought to already be operating in the United States in support of the NWO. Much of this rhetoric would become anti-Semitic, claiming the Jews controlled the monetary system and media, and in turn the Zionist occupation government. ZOG. The militia of Montana became a key organization in pushing right-wing rhetoric and informing individuals on how to form militia organizations. A series of incidents in the early 1990s caused a surge of militia participation. The 1992 standoff between federal authorities and the Weaver family at Ruby Ridge, Idaho, became a spark for the movement. On August 14th, 1992, a 12-day standoff began that would result in the death of one federal agent and the wife and son of Randy Weaver. The following February, a 51-day siege would occur at the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, resulting in the death of 82 Davidians and 4 law enforcement agents. In November of 1993, the enacting of the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act of 1992 additionally fueled the movement. The movement reached its peak in 1996 with over 850 groups believed to be operating within the United States. And then there's a picture that says, "Defend America, join the militia." Noteworthy militia activity from 1995 to 1999. November the 9th, 1995, Oklahoma constitutional militia members are arrested as they plan to bomb the Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC, gay bars, and abortion clinics. December 18th, 1995, a drum of ammonium nitrate and fuel oil is found behind the IRS building in Reno, Nevada. The device failed to explode. An anti-government tax protester is later arrested for the incident. January the 18th, 1996, a member of the Aryan Republic Army ARA is arrested in Ohio after a shootout with the FBI. The ARA was also associated with 22 bank robberies between 1994 and 1996. January 1st, 1996, 12 members of an Arizona militia group called Viper Team were arrested on conspiracy, weapons, and explosives charges after they were caught doing surveillance on government buildings. July 27th, 1996, a bomb is detonated at the Atlantic Olympic Park, killing one person and injuring 100. Eric Robert Rudolph is later arrested and linked to other bombings at abortion clinics and a gay bar. October 11th, 1996, 7 members of Mountaineer Militia were arrested for plotting to blow up the FBI Fingerprint Records Center in Western Virginia. July 4th, 1997, members of a splinter group of the Third Continental Congress were arrested in the process of plotting attacks on military bases. The group thought that many military installations were training United Nations troops that were planning on attacking United States citizens. March the 18th, 1998, members of the North American Militia were arrested on firearms charges. Prosecutors claimed that the group conspired to bomb federal buildings in Michigan, a televised station, and an interstate highway interchange. December 5th, 1999, members of the California-based San Joaquin Militia were charged with conspiracy to bomb critical infrastructure sites in hopes of provoking an insurrection. The leaders of the organization also pled guilty to plotting to kill a federal judge. December 8, 1999, the leader of a militia coalition known as Southeastern States Alliance was charged with conspiracy to bomb energy facilities in order to cause power outages in Florida and Georgia. Decline of the movement. The militia movement began to decline after the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing and raids on the Montana, Freeman, and Republic of Texas in 1996 and 1997. Poor public opinion of the militia movement and increased attention from law enforcement caused many of the uncommitted members to leave the movement. Many of the hardcore militia members grew angry with the militia for not mobilizing in response to perceived government aggressions. Some of these fanatics would splinter into smaller or underground groups adhering to the principles of leaderless resistance. Many militia groups began to rally members in the belief that the government would collapse due to the Y2K scare. This theory claimed that the government would collapse due to computers not being able to handle the transition from the 1900s to the 2000s. The militia's inaccurate assessment of the Y2K threat badly damaged its reputation. Additionally, thoughts that President George W. Bush was sympathetic to their situation and a wave of patriotism after 9/11 would further diminish the militia movement. The militia post-September 11, 2001. During this time period, the militia had lost the attention of the mainstream media and public, but it continued to exist. The SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center, reports that between the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995 and 2005, that roughly 60 right-wing extremist plots were uncovered. Noteworthy militia activity from 2000 to 2008. March the 9th, 2000. The former leader of a Texas militia was arrested for conspiracy to attack the Houston Federal Building. March 31st, 2001. A former colonel in the Kentucky militia peppered a deputy's car with semi-automatic weapons fired during a traffic stop. February the 8th, 2002. 2 members of a group called Project 7 were arrested for plotting to kill judges and law enforcement officers in order to kick off the revolution. September the 3rd, 2002. A plot by the Idaho Mountain Boys militia to murder a federal judge and a police officer and then break a friend out of jail was uncovered. July the 7th, 2003, a Michigan militia member killed a Michigan state trooper that attempted to serve him a warrant. October 25th, 2004, a farmhand in Tennessee was arrested for attempting to obtain ingredients for sarin gas and C4 explosives in order to conduct anti-Semitic and government attacks. June the 29th, 2007, 6 members of the Alabama Free Militia were arrested on weapons and explosive charges. An ATF agent would go on to testify that 5 of the men were planning an attack on Mexicans in a town near Birmingham. December of 2008, National Guard and Reserve facilities received packages with anti-New World Order rhetoric. This would occur within a week of hoax anthrax mailings to state governors' offices. Re-emergence of the movement. Right-wing extremists and militia leaders continuously exploit current world events in order to increase participation in their movements. Due to the current economical and political situation, a lush environment for military activity has been created. Unemployment rates are high, as well as a cost of living expenses. Additionally, President-elect Barack Obama is seen as tight on gun control, and many extremists fear that he will enact firearms legislation. White supremacists from within the militia movement have further become angered due to the election of the first African-American president. Many constitutionalists within the movement have claimed that President Obama does not meet the residency requirements to hold the office of president, and therefore his election is unconstitutional. His residency requirements. How about his natural-born citizenship status? They can't even state it properly. Newer versions of the NWO conspiracy have been concocted in order to empower the movement. The NWO is seen as using law enforcement, military, National Guard, and federal agencies in order to carry out the elitist one-world government. Law enforcement and military forces are believed to be utilized in order to confiscate firearms and place individuals into FEMA concentration camps. This scenario has received additional attention due to the U.S. Army NORTHCOM assigning Homeland Security functions to an active duty infantry brigade. The movement sees this brigade as the force that will take their firearms, and that the unit is in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. There are also concerns that the banking and media infrastructure are also being controlled by Jewish elite, and that these leaders are members of the NWO. There is a great deal of anger towards the Federal Reserve System and all forms of tax collection. Additional motivators for militia activity. Ammunition Accountability Act. The Ammunition Accountability Act has been up for legislation in most states. The legislation would require that an ID number be engraved on the round of all ammunition, and this ammo could in turn be linked to a place of purchase and the purchaser. Some states have added a clause to the act making it a misdemeanor to possess unregistered ammunition. Bill did not pass in Missouri. Anticipation of the economic collapse of the United States government. Many militia organizations feel the United States government will fall due to economic or racial issues. They believe that during the chaotic fall of the government, moves will be made to install martial law, confiscate firearms, and imprison many citizens. This fear has recently been heightened by a report from a Russian economic analyst, Igor Panarin. Panarin predicted that the U.S. would collapse and fraction into 6 different regions controlled by foreign governments. Panarin goes on to say that as early as the autumn of 2009, the economic crisis will lead to a civil war. Possible Constitutional Convention, CONCON. Currently, 32 states have called for a constitutional convention, CONCON, that will add amendments to the United States Constitution. The CONCON will be held if 2 more states request it. The convention is planned specifically for the reason of adding a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. The militia movement is concerned that if a CONCON is held, the First and Second Amendments will be altered or removed. North American Union, NAU. Conspiracy theorists claim that this union would link Canada, the United States, and Mexico. The NAU would unify its monetary system and trade the dollar for the Amero. Associated with this theory is concern over a NAFTA superhighway, which would fast-track trade between the 3 nations. There is additional concern that the NAU would open up the border, causing security risk and free movement for immigrants. Kansas City and the Smart Port are seen as the hub of the North American Union. Universal Service Program. Statements made by President-elect Obama and his Chief of Staff have led extremists to fear the creation of a civilian defense force. The theory requires all citizens between the ages of 18 and 25 to be forced to attend 3 months of mandatory training. Radio Frequency Identification, RFID. There is a fear that the government will enforce mass RFID human implantations. This process would make it possible for the government to continually know the locations of all citizens. Militia trends, ideologies. Members of the militia movement often subscribe to ideology of other right-wing extremist movements such as Christian identity, religious ideology. Popular in extreme right-wing circles, adherents believe that whites of European descent can be traced back to the lost tribes of Israel. Many consider Jews to be the satanic offspring of Eve and the serpent, while non-whites are mud people created before Adam and Eve. White nationalist. Many white supremacists, national socialists, neo-Nazis, and skinheads are drawn to the movement and its anti-government, Semitic, and anti-immigration rhetoric. Sovereign citizens. Individuals that see themselves as sovereign citizens question the legitimacy of the federal government. They argue that the government has gotten away from the intent of the Constitution and is thus not valid. These groups are strong states' rights advocates but see the county sheriff as the highest position of authority. These groups and individuals are well known for failure to register vehicles and driving without valid licenses. Sovereign citizens have been known to issue their own license plate and driver's license and to issue summons to appear in a common law court. Militant abortion. Anti-abortionists have been known to take up arms in support of their beliefs. Eric Rudolph, who was responsible for the Atlanta Olympic Park bombing and abortion clinics, was an anti-abortionist. Tax resistors. This movement is strongly in opposition to the collection of federal income taxes. Individuals in this movement generally believe that income taxes are invalid or the tax laws do not apply to them. Anti-immigration. Some militia organizations have been formed solely for the purpose of countering the threat of illegal immigration. Extremists will argue that immigrants are taking up jobs of the United States citizens during times of high employment. Additionally, illegal immigrants are seen as sucking up government resources without paying taxes. Some militia units patrol the border in order to safeguard against drug smugglers, gangs, or violent immigrants. Training. Utilization of MILSIM. Militia members have been attending military simulation events, MILSIM, in order to increase their combat readiness. MILSIM is a realistic combat sport in which two forces, sometimes up to the platoon level, utilize paintball, airsoft, or miles gear to conduct realistic war games. The desire to increase the realism of MILSIM has drawn members to seek and conduct military leadership, planning, communications, navigations, and tactics training. Militia and survival training events. Regional training events are being held with the intent of teaching individuals how to establish militia organizations. These events usually focus on individual soldier skills, land navigation, and marksmanship. Some events have been set up in order to prepare for joint operations between militia organizations. Communications. The use of shortwave radios for communication and broadcast is common among most militia groups. These groups communicate through forums, Yahoo groups, blogs, and social networking sites. Websites and online talk shows have been established to push rhetoric, usually a skewed version of current events. Recruitment. Militias are recruiting members and supporters through the following means: gun shows, online forums, websites, social networking sites, and informal social networks. Additionally, militia recruitment has been done at events or meetings held by organizations that share ideologies with the militia. Organization, public groups. These organizations hold training events that are open to the public and generally recruit publicly. These groups desire to aid the county sheriff or governor in emergencies such as a natural disaster. It is not uncommon for these groups to be seen in public doing community service related work. Public groups are less likely to publicly push malicious rhetoric and have a traditional military-style chain of command and leadership structure. These groups have been known to form underground units and provide training and guidance to new or forming organizations. Underground groups. These groups primarily adhere to the principles of Louis Beam's philosophy of leaderless resistance. This philosophy advocates small, autonomous cells driven by ideology rather than by the direction of leaders. These groups are difficult to gather intelligence on, as no one outside of the cell would be aware of the organization or its plans. Individuals or lone wolves have also been known to adhere to the principles of leaderless resistance in order to perform or plot acts of violence. Committee of Safety, COS. Organizations established to lobby government officials and confront corruption. These groups claim to be a voice of the people and usually control or associate with militia organizations in their region. These organizations are targeted at the county level, but are also forming state and national level organizations. Covenant militia communities, community of militia members that attempt to create a sovereign township. In the 1990s, there were an estimated eight of these communities identified across the country. Militia associations. These organizations attempt to network various militias through the internet, meetings, or events. Groups such as the American Constitutional Militia Network, AGMN, and the Rogue Nations Eternal Militia, RNEM, are active online communication sites for militia members and organizations. Implications for law enforcement. There are significant differences between the 1990s era militias and those of today, most notably, highly trained. Militia members are receiving more professionalized training than they did during the first spike of movement in the 1990s. Leadership training. Militia members are receiving advanced leadership and operational planning training. This has allowed for the establishment of a strong non-commissioned officer corps, NCO, within groups. And NCO corps allows operations to be run at the fire team and squad size. This enables units to conduct multiple operations simultaneously. Complex attacks. This training will also enable individuals to form and train their own organizations. You are the enemy. The militia subscribes to anti-government and NWO mindset, which creates a threat to law enforcement officers. They view the military, National Guard, and law enforcement as a force that will confiscate their firearms and place them in FEMA concentration camps. Implications for Missouri. Infrastructure at risk in Missouri. Detention centers. Right-wing extremism believes that there are at least 3 FEMA concentration camps in the state of Missouri. The former Richards Gebar AFB in Grandview, Missouri. Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Camp Crowder in Neosho, Missouri. North American Union. The Kansas City Smart Port, which is a hub for fast-track trade and distribution between the U.S. and Mexico, is seen as the hub of the North American Union. A shipping and distribution center is underway in the former Richard Gebar AFB in Grandview, Missouri. This facility is seen both as a FEMA concentration center and a facility for the NAU. Federal Reserve Banks. Members of the militia movement are strongly against the FRS, Federal Reserve System, and see it as a mechanism of the elitist New World Order. In November, End the Fed protests were held nationwide at Federal Reserve banks in opposition to the FRS. Many right-wing extremists oppose the FRS and propose a system that would be backed by gold. Federal Reserve banks may also draw attention from anti-bailout protesters and activists. National Guard facilities. National Guard armories and facilities are seen as potential staging areas for NWO troops. Additionally, there are fears that the National Guard will be forced to confiscate weapons and enforce martial law. Some individuals in the movement have argued that National Guard soldiers and units have had their weapons confiscated, have been transformed into no combat units such as supply, transportation, or medical elements, or are being deployed overseas in order to weaken the defense of the state against the NWO. Federal buildings or facilities. Within the movement, there is a distrust and anger towards the federal government, primarily towards the IRS, ATF, FBI, FEMA, common militia symbols, political and anti-government rhetoric. Political paraphernalia. Militia members most commonly associate with third-party political groups. It is not uncommon for militia members to display Constitutional Party, Campaign for Liberty, or libertarian material. These members are usually supporters of the former presidential candidate Ron Paul, Chuck Baldwin, and Bob Barr. Anti-government propaganda. Militia members commonly display picture, cartoons, bumper stickers that contain anti-government rhetoric. Most of this material will depict the FRS, IRS, FBI, ATF, CIA, UN, law enforcement, and the New World Order in a derogatory manner. Additionally, racial, anti-immigration, and anti-abortion material may be displayed by militia members. Militia symbols. The Gadsden flag, created by General Christopher Gadsden, utilized in colonial America. This is the most common symbol displayed by militia members and organizations. The Huttery Militia, patch of a popular Michigan-based militia that has a presence and influence in many states. 1st Battalion, 3rd BDE, Missouri Militia patch. Unit patch displayed by Missouri militia members. Sovereign Citizen. Flags usually displayed by sovereign citizen in order to represent sovereign common law jurisdiction. Molon Lobby. Greek phrase that translates to "come and take them," or "over my dead body." Phrase originated during the Spartan and Persian battle at Thermopylae and was recently made popular again by the movie 300. Upside down flag. The militia uses this as a symbol of a nation in distress. 9 stripes of the Sons of Liberty. Sons of Liberty was a secret society of patriots during the American Revolutionary War. Many militia members claim the Sons of Liberty as part of their heritage. 1st Navy Jack. Continental Navy flag, which also is displayed with a stretched out rattlesnake and the inscriptions "Don't Tread on Me." Zeitgeist the movie, anti-Federal Reserve System film. America, Freedom to Fascism, anti-income tax film. The Turner Diaries, novel that depicts the violent revolution of the United States government and a war that leaves only a white population. This book was promoted by Timothy McVeigh and said to be the motivation behind the Oklahoma City bombing. Comments regarding this alert may be made to brandon.middleton@mshp.dps.mo.gov. Comments on previous MIAC strategic alerts or ideas for research on future strategic products should be made to greg.hug, H-U-G, at mshp.dps.mo.gov. Missouri Information Analysis Center, Division of Drug and Crime Control, P.O. Box 568, Jefferson City, Missouri 65102-0568. Phone number 573-751-6422. Toll free 866-362-6422. Fax number 573-751-9950. MIAC disclaimer. All information contained in this newsletter should be considered law enforcement sensitive. Further distribution of information in this newsletter is restricted to law enforcement officers and agencies, intelligence agencies, and Department of Defense organizations only, unless prior approval is obtained from the published source. No report or segment thereof may be released to any media sources. Civil and criminal penalties may exist for misuse, and persons or organizations violating this policy will be removed from all distribution lists. The information herein may not be MIAC originated intelligence unless noted. Therefore, the annotated originated agencies in the newsletter should be contacted for the sources and reliability of information. Unclassified, law enforcement sensitive, U/LES. All right, there's a website at the bottom of every page. It says firearmscoalition.org. So anyway, this was the state of mind when the government sent in informants to entrap Schaeffer Cox, Coleman Barney, Lonnie Vernon, and Karen Vernon. And it shows you what impact Eric Holder and Obama had on the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice and the FBI, and their biased attack upon Schaeffer Cox.